Tonight, the Bank of Canada is expected to raise the interest rate for the 8th time. Will Canadians be able to cope with rising groceries and fuel? And on this International Day of Education, Rohingya refugees are calling on the Bangladeshi government to stop closing their schools.
So we request the Bangladesh government, please review your decision. It is very important for us to continue our learning center and the private center, which is very important for our generation.
Later in the show, we look at how Canada benefits after the 3 Amigos summit of Canada, the US and Mexico.
Dealing significant issues, immigration, drug trafficking, supply chain that you mentioned, right? So these are not always easy things to do, but I think setting the stage for a productive dialogue is probably the most important part of similar summits.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I am Catherine Bullock. Before we go into the news stories, if you want to be part of our special news coverage on the anniversary of the Quebec mosque shooting, share a short video message on how to stop Islamophobia. Record a video message below 30 seconds and share it on our Facebook page with hashtag Muslim News Canada and hashtag Stop Islamophobia Canada. We will share the best 3 messages on our platforms. Economic experts expect that the Bank of Canada will raise its interest rate for the 8th time this week, bringing it to 4.5%. The hike in the rate is an attempt to control inflation. Watchdogs doubt the upcoming move is necessary. So far, the hikes have brought the inflation down from 8% to 6.3%. Many economists think another hike in interest rates will make it too difficult for Canadians to cope. They are already dealing with expensive groceries and fuel. With the upcoming 8th hike, experts worry that the economy will shrink, slowing GDP growth. On this International Day of Education, Rohingya educators in Bangladesh refugee camps are calling on international NGOs to advocate on their behalf for their right to education while in the camps. In a 3-minute video sent to Burma Task Force in the US, a Rohingya educator makes a plea to the Bangladesh government to stop closing down private schools run by Rohingya in the camps. The video opens on a blackboard with white chalk, reminding people that education is a basic human right. The educator says the schools give children hope for their future. The Bangladeshi government has been shutting down these schools since last year. An Asian farm worker is in custody after 7 people have been killed and 1 critically injured Monday in 2 shootings in Half Moon Bay in Northern California. The latest bloodshed to hit Asian Americans in California occurred at 2 farms around Half Moon Bay, a coastal community near San Francisco. San Mateo County Sheriff says that a 67-year-old Half Moon Bay resident has been taken into custody. Just before the tragedy, detectives at the southern end of the state were probing a previous attack where an elderly Asian immigrant shot dead 11 people gathered in celebration at a suburban dance hall. He then took his own life. Investigation for both incidents is ongoing. Toronto police are looking for a suspect who hit a man on his head for wearing a religious symbol. Police responded to a call last week reporting an assault at the Bloor Young Toronto station. When the police reached the scene, a man had been struck in the head, causing his turban to fall off. The attacker made derogatory comments before exiting the subway station. According to the police, the victim sustained minor head injuries. The police did not identify the religious affiliation and age of the victim. However, a media source reports that the victim is Sikh. Since the free trade agreement between Canada, the US, and Mexico was first signed in 1994, the region has developed an economic system representing about 1/3 of global GDP. The pandemic and the Russian war against Ukraine has affected the world in multiple ways. One of these is a search for supply chains that are not overly dependent on one region. To talk to us more about what the recent 3 Amigos summit achieved in these issues and others, we're joined now by Professor Offer Barron, Distinguished Professor of Operations Management and Academic Director, MMA Program at the Rotman School of Management, University of Toronto. Thanks for joining us today on the show.
Thank you for having me.
What were you watching for at the summit?
I think the most important part was to see some kind of an agreement from all three leaders on the continuation of the joint economical efforts of North America. The broad idea of working together to improve the quality of life of people who are living here and in other places around the world is something important. In many cases, we've seen leadership in several countries trying to be very narrow in how they look at things, often short-sighted and kind of thinking, oh, the only thing that is good for my people is local product. And this is something that is not true for the long run. And I was happy to see that there was a lot of good spirit of agreement coming from this summit.
It's interesting that you would put it in that way, because sometimes critics talk about these summits as sort of quote unquote photo opportunities for the leaders that don't really deliver much than vague agreements. I wonder if you could make the connection between what they were talking about in Mexico City and quality of life improvement.
So I have to agree with the critics that much of those summits are often more for the media and as a photo opportunity. Having said that, it does set the tone on how the leaders feel with each other, how their consultants feel with each other, and how their countries approach one another in their day-to-day activities. And in this case, we're obviously focusing on economical activities. So the fact that there is a positive tone of agreement and understanding among those countries is something important. Dealing with significant issues, immigration, drug trafficking, supply chain that you mentioned, right? So these are not always easy things to do, but I think setting the stage for a productive dialogue is probably the most important part of similar summits.
I do want to ask you about the issues in a minute, but I just want to dwell on this question for one more moment. If you say they're setting the stage for the productivity, then who takes up the lead next? Is it the bureaucrats who are going to develop the policies? Like, sort of what happens next?
Yeah, so in many cases, such summits are being following some kind of, as you said, bureaucratic agreements. And in many cases, they also set the stage for kind of the next round of bureaucratic agreements. So I think it's important to do both of them. I'm trying to go back to your previous question about how this impacts our quality of life. So free trade and the ability to buy things here that are produced south of the border or in Mexico without facing too much tariffs on this is something that we observe daily as important one, just in terms of even fixing prices and reducing inflation. Obviously, there's several large sectors of the economy that are benefiting from import and export. So about 2/3 of Canadian economy is export, right? I mean, I think I've seen 3/4 of the Mexican export is to the US, right? So those are kind of extremely important for the economy of Canada and Mexico, US being kind of obviously the dominant partner in this agreement.
Right.
But obviously the benefit that Americans are getting out of this is significant as well. So the benefit the US citizens are getting out of this is significant as well.
So let me try to put this into a practical example. Actually, our washing machine is broken at the moment, and we're waiting for a part that's coming up from the US. We've been waiting almost 3 weeks. Don't talk to us about the laundry load at home. So is that what you're talking about, free trade and the supply chain issues?
Yeah, so those are part of the examples. I mean, the last now for Canada Custom to stop this item for another week and charge you another $100 for it, right? You're already using your neighbors to do the. Yes, I'm not sure how. I don't want to think about it.
So for somebody who's uncertain, this word supply chain, can you just give us the very basic, like what does it actually mean?
Oh, that's a good question. So to some extent, if you think about most of the things that we buy today are being brought to us. We are often focused on what I would call the last mile. This would be, me going to the store and picking it up from the store, or, especially after COVID, we got used to do a lot of what's called e-retail, right? Like a truck or somebody's bringing it to my house. Uber Eats and so on are examples of this. But this last step is coming kind of after a lot of work and effort that is being done in many cases internationally. So if you think about electronic equipment, laundry machines, furniture, they're not typically being used locally from raw material to finished products. So bringing all these raw materials together from different places around the world, assembling things, shipping them to the warehouse, shipping them to the retailer, all of this is require coordination among different players, often in different countries and obviously different businesses. And doing this effectively is part of what supply chain management is.
So then what was the issue that the summit is supposed to have addressed?
So as a specific example, one of the issues that was related to supply chain management was the content of cars. Will they be defined as locally made? What is the percentage of locally made in North America that is sufficient for this? Now, if you think about those raw materials that are coming for cars, the metal, the glass, the plastic, right? They all contribute to this added value at the end of the day. So even if most of the work is being done into designing the motor itself comes from that maybe coming from another country. Similar plastic, the raw material for plastic may be coming from other countries and so on. So when you start doing these calculations, this is not always trivial, and there's no just one calculation which would be appropriate. In many cases, the car supply chain, at least between US and Canada, a finished product car, often its components have crossed the border between US and Canada several times. So you think about how many items are being kind of assembled there.
Right.
Sometimes some of the work is being in the US, some of it is being done in Canada, and those sort of things. Now, I think
I gather at this summit that Canada and Mexico had a small, I don't know if victory is too strong a word, but against the US, who was defining its car parts as local and excluding parts that were from Canada and Mexico. I don't know the whole story, but maybe you can just quickly, we're almost out of time, tell us what that was.
Yeah, so it's important part if you count the added value that is being given in Canada and Mexico, local manufactured for US, especially where the US brand of Made in America, right? It's important for us to be able to be part of Made in America and not just made outside of America.
Well, we're out of time. We've scratched the surface, but thank you very much for explaining some of the basics to us today.
Thank you very much. It was a very pleasant visit here. Hope you have a good day.
You too. Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe and God bless.